I say it's easily done. You just pick someone, pretend that you never have met.
When Bob Dylan recorded that song for his album Another Side of Bob Dylan in 1964, it was a dashed off album. I think it was recorded in 1 or 2 days. You can hear mistakes all over it, and that's, you know, a lot of its charm. When that album came out, a critic named John Landau, who later went on to become Bruce Springsteen's manager and one of the great art collectors in the United States, he said Bob Dylan should do that song with a band someday, because he heard the rhythm. He heard the syncopation in the rhythm. He heard the song just crying out to be bigger. And when Bob Dylan was touring with the band, first in the United States and then in Australia and Scandinavia and Ireland and England in the spring of 1966, I Don't Believe You, that song was one of the hardest and one of the most explosive of all the songs that they did on stage. One of the songs that angered people as much as anything. Because here was a song that had been done with acoustic guitar, and it kind of sounded like a folk song, and anyway it was small, and it wasn't, you know, grabbing you by the throat. And then it came out with an enormous roar and with a kind of rhythm that would, you know, made the singer seem to go back and forth as if a wind was blowing him one way and the other. And it was glorious, and it was outrageous for people who came there to be outraged. And on this tour in 1966 in England, a lot of people did come to be outraged. They actually were organized. People would buy masses of tickets, and then when Bob Dylan came out with a rock and roll band, they would get up and unmask and walk out. Some of them would bring posters. Some of them would come and they had rehearsed to stamp their feet off the beat, to clap off the beat, to wreck the music. And I could go into even more conspiratorial sides of that, but I won't. It was a partnership that over the next years really deepened in richness and in musical sympathy and in people being able to anticipate what the other person would do next, not because they'd heard it before, but because they were understanding each other's instincts, where anybody would go after they had tripped in a certain way, what anybody would say after somebody had said something else. And you know, it was very interesting at the last waltz, the band's farewell concert in 1976, 10 years after they had that tour in the UK, 11 years after they had first played together. And the band had gone on to a great career. Bob Dylan had hit off up in Woodstock for years. Then he came back in 1974 on a tour with the band. So here's this big night at Winterland in San Francisco, Thanksgiving night. And there's everybody you can think of. There's Neil Young, and there's Muddy Waters, and there's Dr. John, and there's Joni Mitchell, and there's Neil Diamond, and there's Eric Clapton, and you know, there's a dozen people. There's Ronnie Hawkins. There are all kinds of people I'm forgetting. There's Van Morrison, who pretty much saved the show, because all these big names would troop across the stage, and the band would back them all, and it got a little tedious. It was as if everybody was kind of preening in their own privilege to be there on that stage, to know that Martin Scorsese was filming them as they sang, as they moved, with every movement rehearsed and blocked out, and it began to slow down. And Van Morrison clearly understood this, and he came out on stage and he sang the most violent version of his song Caravan imaginable, and then when it was over, he kicked his way off the stage like a rocket. He looked absolutely terrible and ridiculous. He was pudgy, and he was poured into this ridiculous purple stage suit, and he's kicking his legs up in the air, and suddenly everybody realized that, a glass had been broken. And then Bob Dylan came on. And Bob Dylan had clearly seen exactly the same thing. And he started playing a song. He did 5 songs. There was not a break between them. One song led into the next. He started with Baby Let Me Follow You Down. He ended with Baby Let Me Follow You Down, which was always the fastest song he and the band played. And went from one song into the next, and he was pushing, and he was rangy. It was like a bunch of people sitting around a campfire singing songs, and then Billy Bob Thornton and Iggy Pop from Jim Jarmusch's movie Dead Man show up and shoot the place up. That's what Bob Dylan was doing. And that was it. That was the end. And it was like you had gone to the Academy Awards, and you'd seen everybody get their Oscars, and then somebody came up and held a gun to the head of the host and began making demands on behalf of the American Indians, which, if not fulfilled in the next 5 minutes, would lead to the end of the world. That's how it felt. That was a partnership. It was a rich, rich partnership. And when that partnership ended, I think something went out of Bob Dylan and his music. I think he no longer had anybody who would call him on something when it wasn't any good, when it was fake, when it was a lie. He gave a very interesting interview a few years ago where he talked about the difference between songs that lie and songs that can't lie. And he said that a song like Idiot Wind on Blood on the Tracks, an album he put out in 1975 that was greeted with the most fantastic reviews imaginable and was celebrated and people were crazy about. And he talked about that song, really the most searing and angry and bitter and guilty song on that record. And he said, this is a song that can lie. It can lie because it has a point it wants to get across. It has something to prove. It's making an argument. It's trying to establish something. It's trying to get you to agree with something, to believe something. A song like that is almost always going to lie. But a song that doesn't want you to agree with it, that isn't trying to tell you something, isn't trying to convince you of something, that's simply trying to find its way from one word to the next, to find what the first word wants from the second word, that a song that allows the melody to choose the words, to shape the words, to bend the words, that song can't lie, because you don't know what that song is about. It's about something different every time you sing it. The song demands something from you. You are not demanding something from the song. And a song like I Don't Believe You, we can all make up our minds about whether that's a song that can lie or a song that can't. But for a long time, I think Bob Dylan's music was music that could lie, because there was nobody there with him who he trusted, who he respected, who he was afraid of, who he loved, who could say to him, I don't believe you.
Well, everybody's building boats. Some are building monuments, others jotting down notes.